When I think about wildlife on TV or in magazines, I sometimes wonder how much those stories shape what we believe about nature. It feels like the media, especially outlets like National Geographic, play a huge part in how we understand the environment and animals.
That's so true. National Geographic, for example, has been telling stories about animals and the wild for over a century now. But it's not just about pretty pictures they've pushed, environmental messages front and center, which can really influence public opinion and even drive policy changes.
It's wild how a magazine can prompt politicians to act or make people care about issues like climate change. But do you think these stories always get it right? Or do they sometimes oversimplify what's actually going on?
They definitely walk a fine line. Sometimes, media coverage adopts simplified narratives or dramatic frames, but they can also bring overlooked problems to the surface, like illegal wildlife trading, or how our economic system encourages environmental exploitation. That tension is part of why media frames matter so much.
That actually reminds me of this concept I keep hearing about the Anthropocene. It sounds fancy, but what does it really mean for how we see ourselves and the natural world?
The Anthropocene is basically the idea that we've entered a new geological era, where humans are the dominant force shaping the planet. Think massive environmental changes, species extinctions, and landscapes being altered by cities and industry. The media's role, then, is to help people grasp how our everyday actions fit into this much larger story.
So, when media cover melting ice caps or disappearing forests, they're not just reporting isolated disasters, they're kind of connecting the dots to say, hey, this is all linked to us and our way of life.
Exactly, and sometimes media stories miss that connection, framing things as natural disasters rather than consequences of human choices. But the Anthropocene lens really asks us to take responsibility, not just for the problems, but for the solutions too.
Funny you say that because when I scroll through social media, I see everything from exotic pets to luxury safaris, and it feels like the wild has become just another product. How does this idea of commodification fit into the way media cover wildlife?
It's everywhere. Commodification is about treating nature, animals, plants, even whole landscapes as things to be bought, sold, or displayed. Media can fuel this by glamorizing exotic animals or presenting wilderness as entertainment. Think about the viral stories of cheetahs as pets, or the popularity of wildlife tourism.
And the impact goes way beyond just images, right? It shapes how people interact with nature, sometimes encouraging harmful markets like illegal trafficking, or making us forget what's really at stake.
Right, like with cheetahs on Instagram or rare plants being poached because collectors see them online. Sometimes, even conservation stories accidentally reinforce the idea that wildlife is valuable mainly for what it can offer us, rather than for its own sake.
Last week, we got stuck on a story about Wildlife Watch. National Geographic claims it's about exposing exploitation and changing perceptions. Do you think their framing helps, or are there downsides to how they tell these stories?
It's a bit of both. Wildlife Watch does great work, shining a light on global trafficking rings, the role of social media in illegal animal trade, and calling out harmful traditions. Those stories can spark real-world policy changes, like social platforms adding disclaimers to wildlife tourism posts.
But sometimes, I notice a bit of drama in the reporting, almost like the wild becomes a stage for human action, or tragedy is exaggerated to keep us engaged.
Absolutely, and that dramatization can be a double-edged sword. While it grabs attention, it can also oversimplify complex realities, or accidentally promote the very commodification it's trying to critique. Still, compared to most outlets, National Geographic tends to challenge outdated myths and push for deeper awareness.
After hearing all of this, I can't help but wonder, how do we move the conversation forward? Can media stories really help us rethink our relationship with nature, or are we stuck in these old patterns?
I think stories shape the way we see the world, so there's a lot of power there. If media, especially major players like National Geographic, keep challenging the idea that nature is just a commodity, that could shift attitudes and policies. But we also need more honesty about the tough parts. Who benefits? Who loses? And what coexistence really means.
And maybe, if we start demanding those more honest, less sensationalized stories, we'll build up a public that's not just entertained, but actually inspired to act.
Exactly, the next chapter isn't just about awareness, but about responsibility and finding new ways to live alongside the wild, rather than just consuming or controlling it. If we can get that message across, maybe there's hope for both people and the planet.